Hello. Is my voice audible?
Hey Jyotsha, it's Manish. I will be taking your interview. Can you please share your screen? Am I
Okay,
audible?
yeah. Yeah. Hi, Manish. I'm sharing my screen. It's first time I'm using Zoom here, so I have to give permissions.
No issues. Hey Shubham, you there?
Yeah, Manish, I'm Lavanya.
Okay. Hey Lavanya, can you share this resume with me? Okay, I see it attached. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you, sir.
Okay, yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So Jyotsha, before we begin the interview, I'll just give you a brief how it is going to proceed. Then we'll begin. Okay.
Okay,
So,
sure.
couple of minutes. It's going to be your introduction, where you tell me what you have been doing at your current workplace, what projects you were involved with, and what was your role within those projects. Okay. After that, we'll move on to some basic questions related to JavaScript. See where your understanding of the language is. After that, I'll give you a coding exercise. The coding exercise is going to be quite straightforward. So I expect you to solve that in about 10 to 15 minutes. After that, if there's some time remaining, we can take up questions from your end or we'll just end the interview. Sounds good.
Yeah, sure.
All right, then. Please tell me a bit about yourself.
Okay, yeah. So I've been working for over 2.5 years now. And first, the company that I joined right after graduation was Citibank, where I worked as a software engineer for 2 years. And since after joining Citibank, I got to work with two different teams. So my work experience was related to Python and in a natural language processing project in my first year, and in a full stack role in my second year with React, JavaScript, TypeScript, MongoDB, and Node.js is the complete tech stack. After that, I joined a startup, which is in which also I had a full stack role for a like a desktop first website along with similar backend tech stack, which was MongoDB and Node.js, along with JavaScript, React, Redux in the front end, where I've been working for 4 months now.
Okay, okay, cool. So you work mostly on the front end
Yeah,
at your place. Okay, cool.
in my current work, it was mostly front end heavy.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's start with JavaScript first.
Okay, sure.
I ask you to rate yourself out of 10. How much rating would you give yourself?
Um, I I think I'll go with 8.
Okay, and what about React?
That I suppose I'll have to go with 7 or like 8. I'm not entirely sure, because the thing I can gauge myself on is that like earlier on I had to look up a lot of things, and now that has become less frequent. But again, uh, I do not know what I don't know, right? So like for now, I feel that I'm comfortable enough to be able to perform complicated tasks also, and like in given deadlines.
Okay, okay, cool. So yeah, let's start with JavaScript, then we'll move on to React. Could you tell me what is event loop in JavaScript?
What event loop?
Yep.
I I don't know what event loop. The term I have not come across. Could
Okay,
could
okay,
you like just tell a little bit? Like I know that you can dispatch events and you can have event listeners, but
okay, okay, okay.
Hello, I'm not able to hear you right now.
Hello.
Yeah, your voice was breaking there. I couldn't hear you.
I was asking whether JavaScript is single-threaded or multi-threaded.
JavaScript is single-threaded.
Okay. So if JavaScript is single-threaded, then when we do the asynchronous operations, it will block the main thread, right? So, but that does not happen. So that is where something event loop comes into picture.
Okay.
So yeah, no issues. We'll move on to the next question. Do you have any understanding of closure?
Closure. Again, I'm not like familiar with the term.
Okay, no issues. So what ES6 features have you worked with?
ES6 features, they're like it's mostly been ES6 only. So I know that there is a lot of objects, like managing objects is different in ES6. It's like the code is more readable and understandable in that sense. There are arrow functions there in which also can be used as an inline functions rather than defining functions entirely.
Okay.
Mostly, I believe it's these two that I'm familiar with: the functions being defined differently and the objects. Also, from ES6 onwards, it's being promoted to be using functional components over classes by using the React hooks.
Okay. So what is the difference between a normal function and an arrow function?
The difference between a normal function and arrow function is that the arrow function, the code itself is executed when it comes across, like when the arrow function is called. And it can have its advantages as well as disadvantages. The advantage would be that during compile time, it does not need to be read. But the disadvantage is that if a function is called again and again, then the entire code is also the instance of the code will be created again and again. Rather than if you create a function beforehand and then call it in 3 different places, the same code instance will be used on the 3 different places.
Okay. All right. What is the difference between let and a var?
In the difference between let and var,
Yep.
I believe the difference mostly is between the, like again from ES6 onwards, var is basically not supposed to be used. It's advised against. So I have not used var, but theoretically, I believe the difference is that var doesn't, like the variable does not get destroyed if it is defined inside a loop, and a let variable is destroyed after, like if it is inside a block, a code block, then outside the code block, the let variable cannot be accessed, whereas a var variable can be. So the scopes are different of them. Your audio is again.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yeah, I'm still unable to hear you.
Okay. All right. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So you were telling what was the difference between a let and a var?
Yeah, the difference is mostly like again var. As I said, I've not used var because from ES6 onwards, let and const are supposed to be used, advised to be used. But var, the difference is basically in the scope of them. That let variable inside which is defined inside a block of code will be not accessible outside that block, but a var variable would be. A var variable is not destroyed after the block is run through as well.
Okay. So I'll give you a piece of code in chat. I want you to like tell me what do you think will be the expected output. Okay.
Okay, sure.
All right. So can you please see the chat?
Yeah, I can see now.
Okay. So it's basically a for loop inside which we got a set timeout. Set timeout has a function which is just doing logging the I variable. Okay.
Yeah. But there is no time mentioned inside the timeout.
There's no time mentioned, right? Okay. It really does not make any changes to the question, but okay. Let's put a timeout of 100 milliseconds. All right.
Yeah.
So it would be something like this.
So the variable of the console log would be, so the code will stop running once I reaches 5. So the console log would be 5.
Five times, right?
Yeah, 5 times, because the var's resolution is not inside the block, it will be outside. So when the console log is printed, then whatever the value of var is, that will be printed.
Okay. So, but let's say what I want to do is I want to iterate over the loop. Okay. And I want to print the variables after some timeout, let's say 100 milliseconds. So how can I achieve that?
So that 1, 2, 3, 4 is printed, but after 100 milliseconds.
Yep.
So we can use let, and in that case, it would print 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, that is a valid answer. But what I wanted to understand is, like you said, let was only introduced in ES6, right? But I had to do the same using a var. Do you think it's possible, or how can I do it? Okay, I'll give you a hint. You have any understanding of IFE's immediately invoked function expressions?
Pardon, what did you mention? Immediately invoked
There's
functions.
something called IFE, shared in chat, which means immediately invoked function expressions.
Okay.
Okay. No,
I'm not familiar with the term. It's possible that I've used it, but I'm not familiar with the term.
Okay, no issues. Can you tell me something about this?
Yeah, this is a way to refer to a variable which may have multiple instances, but when we are referring to the variable which is in the closest block, this can be used.
All right.
So basically, if there is a global variable and a variable inside a particular block, then this will refer to the variable inside the block. So I'm assuming you're like this could be used to print 1, 2, 3, 4 using a var.
No. It's we've moved on to the different topic.
Okay.
It's all right. No issues. So, okay. Can you tell me what is the promise?
A promise is a type of response which is always in two parts. One is when it is called, until the response is gotten from the server or whatever the source is. While it is waiting, it is in the form of a promise. And once the actual response is gotten, then the promise is considered to be resolved, and we get the data from the response along with a status message of whether it was resolved or failed.
Okay. So, what is the difference between async await and a promise? Async await and a promise?
Yeah, so I'm thinking what exactly the difference would be. I mean, in the working of it, async await allows you to basically move past the code, but at the same time, like if you have a promise as a response, the alternative which you can do is use await if you want to use the response in the next few lines, or you can use async if you don't want to. So it basically gives both options and more control over what the variable is going to be like. So in the case of promise, we don't exactly know when it will be resolved, so it's harder to use the variables. the response of a particular API call. In async await, we have much more control and understanding of the flow of the code.
All right. Okay. Sounds good. Let's talk about React. Okay. So, like you said, you've been using functional components.
Yeah.
So, what hooks are you using with those functional components?
Mostly using use effect, use state, which are the most basic hooks here that are supposed to be used. Apart from that, there's use selector, which is used along with Redux, with the Redux store to manage variables across components. And I think it's mostly these only. Any others that I have used probably are like a one-off, so I don't recall right now.
Okay, cool. Just tell me what about use effect.
So use effect is basically like all of these hooks with like use effect and use state are supposed to be doing everything that we were earlier doing in a class component. So use effect is equivalent to a class component did mount method. So when the component, like when the render component is being called, then the use effect is triggered.
Okay. All right. So, okay. So when we define a use effect, we can give a dependency array, right?
Yes.
What is the use of that?
If the variable in the dependency array is changed, it would call the use effect again.
Okay. What if I omit the dependency array? I mean, instead of giving an empty array, I just don't write it. Do you think what difference will it create?
If without giving a dependency array, it would just run once when the component is first loaded.
Okay. What happens with the empty dependency array? So, okay, what I'm saying basically is there's one option where you can pass in an empty dependency array like this, right?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is I won't even pass an empty array. I'll just leave the second argument to use effect blank. So the first argument it takes, it's a function. The second one is the dependency array, right? So what if I omit the second argument? Any change in behavior?
Like I actually haven't looked into it, but what I have experienced is that in some cases, when the empty dependency array is not given, it keeps calling upon any components render being changed. But okay. I didn't exactly look into it to identify what exactly causes the re-render. But when given an empty dependency array, that never happens. That problem would never happen.
Okay, all right. So, like you said, you are using Redux for state management, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the context API? There's something called use context.
Use context.
Have you worked with the use context hook?
No, I've not used use context.
No issues. So can you tell me how Redux works actually?
So Redux is basically like making one thing. It is doing just one task, which can be done without Redux also. So if we want a variable to be accessed across different components, one option would be to use local storage, but that doesn't re-render when it's updated. So other option would be to send props, which can be read. But sending props across children and then across basically different components, maybe the two issues come up. First, the code gets complicated and we are having to send the same thing across many different components. And also it gives access to the same variables to components which don't need the access. And that's pointless information.
Of Redux.
So what Redux does is it simply has these props in a way. It has its own variable where it is storing these. But at the same time, when we call use selector, it is always reading from the state. it is always reading from the state. And even if two components which are not connected to each other, if one edits that state, the other which is reading the state will also re-render if that state was changed. So Redux works by creating a variable state which is common for all components and allowing actions to be done on these states via actions, by dispatch actions, so that they can be updated by any component, and use selectors allow any component to read these states.
Okay, cool. So like you said, we dispatch action to update the state, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we dispatch the action, you must have noticed that we always return a new copy of the state, right? Instead of modifying the previous one. So why do we do that?
Yeah, I didn't look into that actually. Yeah, I should have probably. It's a curious thing that we always do that.
It's something to do with immutability.
Okay.
Because if you just keep on updating the state, right?
Hmm.
If you just keep on working one copy of the state and multiple actions are getting dispatched, you might end up with a stale state. So by returning a new object, we always make sure that we are working with the latest one.
Okay. Okay.
No issues.
Yeah.
Let's say you have written a functional component, okay?
Yeah.
And it has some 2 or 3 pieces of state, like let's say first name, last name, and age. Okay? Coming from 3 input boxes. Okay?
Coming from
3 input boxes.
Okay.
Let's say there are 3 input boxes where the user is entering something, and that you are storing it within your state variables. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
state variables as in Redux state or use state?
whatever.
Okay.
Really does not matter. So you're holding it in state. So what my question is, so how do you get access to the previous state? Let's say, so what happens in React? When the state changes, the component re-renders always, okay?
Yeah.
So, but now let's say there's a condition where you don't, even after the state has changed, you don't want the component to re-render, okay? So in class-based components, we had something called should component update,
Yeah.
where you can check between the previous state and the current state. So if you return a false from that function, re-render will not happen, right?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
when we talk about the function components, right? First of all, we don't have should component update. It's not there. Second of all, the thing is when the component has rendered, it has lost access to the previous state. Okay. Now, if I want to do a check, like this is my current state, what was my previous state? How can I do that?
I have not used this, but I believe there is a use like a function to get the previous state of a state variable as well. Like when we are defining the use state, we set a first variable, right? That name, then comma set variable name. I believe it takes parameters for previous state also, but I've never used it, so I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, on the right track. No issues. Coming to the next question. So, like you said, you again coming back to Redux, right? So, Redux is basically to manage the state of the application, right?
Yeah.
But Redux is meant to work. I mean, Redux is synchronous because when you dispatch the action, right? The new state is calculated and the re-render happens. But when we make an API call, let's say you want to set state via the result of API call, and the API call is going to be asynchronous, right? It will take some time for data to come, and after that only you can set it. So to enable that, Redux has something called middlewares for asynchronous works. So what middleware are you using for the async operations?
Like actually we're not using any right now. We for most of these these kind of situations where the variable is coming while the await
Okay.
hasn't resolved, we are
I'll
showing
re-
loading screens.
Okay. I'll rephrase the question. But in any case, the question still remains the same. You see, when the API call happens, I get it. You will show the loading state. So basically,
Hmm.
that is just one more variable which you must have set to true. Is loading true
Hmm.
or loading true, something like
Hmm.
that. And you
Hmm.
do a conditional render of the loading thing. All right. But that does not change the fact that the data still has to come from the API,
Yeah.
right? And if the API call has to happen on a button click, let's say, like maybe it is a form submit, right?
Hmm.
So after that, you have to dispatch an action to get the data as well, right? Okay, have you used anything like Redux Thunk, Redux Saga, anything like
Um.
that?
No, not in this. Uh, we
Okay,
are not doing that job by Redux, basically. What I can say.
okay, but it's really weird, right? Because you are using one tool to manage the state, and then you are not using it to do the asynchronous operations. Okay, no issues.
Just using a sync await only to handle those things.
I mean, even if you do the async await, right? Basically, Redux, you will have to use some middleware. I mean, you will have to use some middleware. I mean, that is what my understanding is. I mean, that's the way it should be done, but maybe at your place you are doing it in a different way. So, okay, no issues. So I've sent you a React.new, right? Can you just open it in your browser?
Uh, how do I? It just says React.new. Okay, is this a website?
Yeah, it's a website. Just open any browser, write React.new, that's it. Cool. So, just a moment. And here is a link for the API. Okay. So what you have to do is you have to call this API. So first write a React component. Okay. The React component will call this API,
Okay.
get a list of users and render the list. Okay. There will also be a button which on click, I think just reload the page.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yeah. So you have to get data from an API. So the API
Hmm.
will return you a list of users. You have to render the list.
Yeah.
That is the first part. The second part is you have to also create a button which on click sorts the list by name. Okay. So on first click, the sorting happens by first name. When you click the same button again, it should sort by last name. And when you click the same button again for the third time, it should reset to the original what you got. Sounds clear?
Okay.
And after that, the behavior repeats.
What was the last thing that you said? The behavior just repeats, right? Of after clicking again and again.
So there's only one button. Okay. So when
Yeah.
you click for the first time, you sort by first name.
Yeah.
Click on second click, sort by last name. Third click, you reset. That's it.
Okay. And basically, then fourth click repeat the actions.
Yeah. Repeat the actions. That's it. So are you clear with the question?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool.
And how am I displaying these users?
Yeah, what did you say?
How will I be displaying these users?
So you just have to display the name. That's it.
Okay, just the name.
So yeah, just the name. So when you make the API call, you will get the full object, right? So
Yeah.
you can just display the name. That's it. Hello. Hello. Yes. Who is this? You called me at some. Yeah, this is Manish. हाँ बोलो बोलो. Hello. Hello. Just tell me what it is. Yeah, what is it? So, fucker. Hello. Send me your resume, man. Send me your resume. Come on. अच्छा अच्छा और चुतिया बना उस लिए तुझे क्या लगा मेरे को पता नहीं है नहीं ठीक छोड़ Hey, sorry, I'm on a call.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some mistake in your package JSON file. Remove this comma. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Hi. Is it alright if I look up some sorting function? Hello. Hi, Manish. Are you there?
Are you done with the question?
Yeah, I was actually calling the dash hire to contact you. So I was done like just a couple of minutes ago actually. No, so didn't have to
Sure.
wait any. I like I had to look just see this function, this local compare, because I was trying to do a manual comparison, but that was not working for some reason, and I just didn't know that there was an E here. So yeah, I had to look that part up. So right now,
So,
what it is, yeah.
so are you able to sort the list?
So right now, what I'm doing is that these are the names using a map here to render all of the names here. This is in the current state. For the button, all I'm doing is a toggle between 0, 1, and 2. 0 is basically no directly fetched state. 1 is sorting by first name. 2 is sorting by last name. So initial state is 0. So it's as fetched. When it's pressed once, it should sort by first name. So it's C, D, E, G, K, L. And here I've also console logged that out. This is the function for the button click. So if button toggle is 1, then do the first sorting function. If you click it again, then it is going to sort by the second.
Okay.
And if you click again, then it fetches to get the first, whatever the initial sequence was. So just using a modulo for that case. So when it goes to 3, then just modulo 3. So you get 0.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Can you click the button? Okay, all right. ठीक है. Okay, then we'll end the interview now. I'll give my
Okay.
feedback and Shubham or Lavanya will get back to you. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Okay, yeah, bye. Thanks.